All right. Well, before we bring up the next group, I think the thing that I could take away from that is that we're not only change agents, right? You're not waiting for somebody to tell you that you're empowered to actually do something about it. Leadership is a quality that you have inside of you, and we sort of need you to unlock that, because without you, none of this comes into play. So we're going to now move into a conversation that looks at two things that you hear quite a bit these days in social: trust and transparency. So help me welcome to the stage Rob Harles of Bloomberg and Carol Cohn of Edelman.
Nice to see you. Okay, here we are.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in, because I think these are two words that I think get thrown out quite a bit. Right? Your strategy has to be transparent, and you have to build trust in order to earn relationships with the social customer. And it sounds good. It sounds wonderful. But what does that even mean? So let's start with you, because you have published every year the Trust Barometer. So I would love for you to get us going, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you've dealt with over the last couple of years.
Sure. Thank you, Brian, and I'm pleased to be here. Edelman's Trust Barometer is now in its 12th year, and it is a piece of global research in 25 countries with 25,000 consumer citizen elites. Mm-hmm. And what is fascinating is that, and it's followed trust in government, lost to trust in government, trust in business, lost in trust in business. NGOs have always been the most trusted. But what happened this year is that we went much deeper. And we studied 16 attributes of trust. And I think there's a slide for that. Well, there you go. And of the 16 attributes, there's operational attributes. You have solid profits. You have trusted leadership. You show honesty and transparency. Those we call operational attributes. But we also found 8 other attributes which are more social. And that's what's coming out in the social business. And at the top of the list to earn future trust is putting customers ahead of profits, engaging with them, treating employees well. So while companies want to earn, and it doesn't matter if they're large or small, so if they want to earn trust today, it's operational, but it's tomorrow's trust that are the more social. Right. And what we find again with social media and technology is that companies are laid bare to the bone. So it's how a company acts and behaves. You can no longer manage it. It has to be distributed, and it's what you do and say.
Right. Well, we live in a world where statements are prepared. Mm-hmm. Crises happen all the time in social media, and we still are stuck in the whole process of, well, what does public relations say we need to say? Let's get that quote approved. And then when it finally does come out, you're wondering, like, is there even a human being behind that, or did that come out of a machine? Rob, 2 years ago at Bloomberg, social media wasn't necessarily the most embraced thing ever.
No, even more than that. There was a policy that said we will not engage in social media whatsoever. In fact, my first day when I joined, I was in this immersion program, and there was one little thing on the agenda, and it said social media, and I looked forward to it all day long. And when I got to it, I got all the questions wrong. It was basically, you can't be on Twitter, you can't be on Facebook, you can't be talking to anyone outside of this firm. So it was really a bit of a challenge, since I'm supposed to be the head of social media, to figure out how I overcome that. But yeah, I mean, Bloomberg, regulated industry. We've built up a reputation over 30 years, a pedigree that's, without parallel, and people really didn't want to wreck that.
Right. Well, one of the things that I found fascinating about the Trust Barometer is that this year's had quite a significant shift over last year, and the idea of people placing trust not in executives' hands, right, but placing trust in employees, right, of company over executives, which I think is kind of like that duh moment, of course. I don't know that I've ever trusted a prepared statement, but I do trust employees like me. I also, right, trust peers like me. So and I'm throwing this out to you first and then to you as well, because I think employees are the key, yet they're also the very people within the organization that may not be happy. Mm-hmm. The culture may not necessarily empower them to be a true representative of the organization. But if people do trust employees of companies, and trust is now a pillar of a social business, then how are leaders within an organization going to finally see the opportunity for their employees?
Well, the great thing that's happening is that very prescient leaders, such as Indra Nooyi at Pepsi, Howard Schultz at Starbucks, Paul Pullman at Unilever, Bob McDonald at P&G, and many, many others, they get it that employees are their ambassadors and that they need to be listened to, they need to be well taken care of, so there's wellness, there's education, but there's also a ton of volunteerism that's happening.
Right.
Getting engaged in things that truly matter to the values of employees. And that's why the whole shift in trust, it's about corporate character. And what's so exciting for me, because I have been helping companies create public-private partnerships for over 30 years. And so now with this transparency, companies understand it's not just what they make, it's not just a profit, but it's also how they engage with society, environmentally, socially, at the local community level.
All right, and Rob, before you answer this, I hope I don't offend anybody. Is anybody from KitchenAid in the audience?
Uh-oh, we're going, uh-oh.
No, you're clear.
Okay.
You're clear.
All right, clear. Well, I guess it's going on Twitter, so I guess we're not clear. It is at KitchenAid USA, by the way, just in case.
Uh-oh, we're not going to cook here.
But we put the power of the brand in the hands of employees. Bloomberg has a reputation to protect and uphold. It's a strategy almost. Well, it's not almost, it is a strategy. So you have a KitchenAid moment where somebody makes a mistake and tweets out something horrible on the wrong account, but as an official representative for the company. How do you get around that? And then I could see somebody at Bloomberg saying, see, I told you.
Right. I think we try to set expectations a little bit more manageably, in the sense that we know that people are going to make mistakes. We're all human. It's how we handle them that's really important. And there's sort of a basic realization that I think we've tried to communicate throughout the company, and I think this is true of all companies in many ways now in this day and age, is that our brands are an amalgam of not just what we want them to be, but what our employees, our customers, our prospects all think about them. And that's something that we have to really wrestle with, because we no longer really control our brands. They are kind of what others think about us. And so we have to think about what we really want to express. And I think the other realization is that employees now also have something, which is a personal brand that they have to think about. We all have personal brands. We're leaving our digital footprints around every day. This is something we were talking about my newborn. I worry about it. Like, she's going to be growing up with nothing but this stuff, and she going to have a personal brand and think about it.
You know what's crazy is that not only that, but she's going to be the first generation that's not going to have a Kodak moment, right? She's going to have an Instagram moment or whatever the next app is.
Exactly.
But around that, though, there has to be somebody saying, look, as an ambassador, as defining our brands, what is our brand, and how does that brand humanize? So let me throw this one to you. I actually believe that the closest companies get today to that is this idea of a vision statement or some type of document that explains what the culture of the company is. I read about 1,500 vision statements when I was writing my last book, and it was amazing how I think I could only find a few of them that actually spoke to me. I could actually see what it might be like to be inside this organization. Certainly, when we talk about culture, one of the top companies that gets thrown out there is Zappos. But in an era, or let's just even say, in a social economy where people trust what others experience, whether they're friends or friends of friends, that has to be a formidable strategy. Somebody has to say, this is who we are and this is how we represent it. So what does that even look like with some of these companies that you're working with?
Well, I think we call it purpose, and it's a reason for being beyond the bottom line. And my favorite purpose, and I think this is going to be, people think it's a commercial for IBM here, but it's not, and I don't work with IBM. But IBM stands for a smarter planet. And when they went through their shift from hardware to software, they could go out and sell software, but there's a lot of companies selling software. They have this vision of creating a smarter planet and of enabling, through their employees, cities and all sorts of different companies and even NGOs to utilize data to be smarter. And so if you ever meet an IBMer, and I've met a lot of them, they know exactly what they're doing. They're helping to make a better future for Violet. And so they get up in the morning, and there's 440,000 of them around the globe, and whether it's new products and services, or whether it's they had their 100th anniversary last year, and they gave over 1 million hours of volunteerism time to NGOs around the globe to create smarter solutions. That's what inspires an organization. That's what moves them forward. If they're that big, or if they're really small, you can be Warby Parker, the glasses company, which I adore, and they're a 1-for-1.
Right.
When we sell you one, we're going to give one away. And so it doesn't matter what size an organization needs to be, but in social business, standing for something beyond the bottom line, and it can be really, really narrow, truly, truly will. And I have all sorts of data that shows how it will absolutely drop to the bottom line, keep employees engaged, and absolutely, at the end of the day, no matter where you are, you're going to feel absolutely great about integrating your values with your business life.
Right, and Rob, before I ask you the next question, you bring up a really interesting point, something that we're going to actually talk about later in the track around philanthropic capitalism, and it's this idea that the Warby Parkers of the world, the Tom Shoes of the world, have figured out that, and I would love to hear your point on this in terms of your research, have figured out that customers' value goes beyond the product.
Absolutely.
And that there is data that I've seen that shows that today's connected customers, and especially millennials, don't just want to buy a product because it's amazing. They want to buy a product because they actually believe that the company's values align with theirs, and so that they're incredibly loyal to fewer companies, but that loyalty is incredible. Right. So what have you seen?
Well, we have another piece of research called Good Purpose, and it's 5 years old, and it's the most comprehensive global research. It's 16 countries, and it's 8,000 consumers. And we found from Good Purpose, watching it over the years, we're now declaring purpose is the 5th P. Because everybody who's a marketer understands, price can be knocked off, and distribution can be knocked off, and promotion can be knocked off. But purpose, when you truly, it's true, it's got to be real. It's embedded into the culture first, then into products and services. That can't be knocked off.
Right.
And so that gives you a competitive edge, especially for millennials. And we have seen a rise it's 26% since 2008. And we asked the question, after price and quality, what is going to trigger you, a citizen consumer, to buy something?
Right.
We said purpose, design and innovation, and brand loyalty. Purpose absolutely blew all the others away, 26% rise over the years. Now, the one thing I have to say, that Apple is outside of that. Apple's an outlier, but almost all of the companies, it's purpose, the 5th P, that can truly create the difference in an organization, large or small.
Yeah, and I'd echo the same thing. When I first started Bloomberg, and I think our 30-year history, we've always been somewhat modest about things that we do and get involved in. But I mean, the cultural question you had earlier was really, really important. It really is top-down, bottom-up at Bloomberg. When I first came in, one of the big selling points of me joining the firm was that we were really environmentally friendly, one of the most environmentally responsible companies in the world. And we take it seriously. We also take our philanthropic endeavors very seriously, but we don't always talk about them. Now we're feeling more and more comfortable doing that. But one of the other things that we've done as a company was we've recognized that capital markets are starting to recognize the value of these things. And I think I even had a slide someplace which talks about our environmental sustainability governance program. I don't know if they have it.
Yeah, let's bring that slide up.
But it's starting to realize that as a product, this is really important. We're starting to track other companies and their impact on the environment, carbon offset, all these sorts of environmental issues, and we know that we're recognizing that there is value in that, and so are the markets.
Well, I think once that becomes an index, it sort of becomes a standard. Right. And I think I like your idea of purpose being the 5th P, although I've for years said the 5th P was people, so maybe we're up to 6 Ps.
Okay.
So,
okay, that's fine.
But I love that idea because it gives sort of this concept of a mission, right? And mission is not just for customers to know that your values align with their values. As you said, it was a big deal for you. So now we're talking about employees, where employees also have to align with the value of the organization. And in an era where you talked about personal brands earlier, and I don't know how many of you have seen this story, but it was making the rounds a few weeks ago, where Salesforce.com was hiring a community manager where they had to have a clout score of at least 35 in order to be considered for the job.
That's interesting. That's great.
So if you're now looking at employing personal brands because of their connectedness and their savvy for being social, a company like Bloomberg, who has everything to lose in terms of reputation,
Right.
how do you now empower or even train or condition people on what the Bloomberg brand is so that it's evoked through their actions?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, we've started off as being a relatively conservative organization, and I think we still are. And we do think about culturally this thing called the Bloomberg Way, which is a certain approach to how we do business. It's our ethics, our quality of information. So we really want to be the number one place where people come for data, news, and analytics, and that's a really high bar to set. So the idea of simply launching opinion through Twitter is not something that we feel very comfortable about. So what we've done is, we started with very basic stuff, which was we started with a policy. I couldn't do anything without changing that policy, and really recognizing that people were going to use these tools whether we wanted them or not. But we still have to apply the same quality of culture to that. So we do set the bar high. We train them. We train our employees, our analysts, our reporters, our salespeople in how to not cause problems with this stuff. In fact, one little story I will tell. When I first joined, my second week, I got a call from the UK. Didn't know that anyone in the UK knew I was at Bloomberg. They wanted to talk to me urgently, and I'm like, okay. And someone had found me on LinkedIn and realized that I was running social media for Bloomberg. They were saying, I love Bloomberg. I run a group. It's one of the largest groups for finance and capital markets on LinkedIn. But I got to tell you, if you guys don't stop spamming me, I'm going to kick you off. I didn't know we were even on it, number one. And number two, I didn't know we were spamming him. But basically, every time a Bloomberg person got on, they were talking about an event they had or a product that they're launching. And we really had to change the mindset of that and give people training about how to, if you're going to use social media, engage with people on the topic of the moment, add value to that conversation, or step back if that's not appropriate.
Right. Well, I think with the time that we have left, I want to look at what is actionable here, because you talked about training. We've talked about values and not just trust and transparency, but the idea that people need to feel some sense of purpose. Right? So it all sounds great. I do have an experience with a company that was developing their social strategy. And as they were developing and by social strategy, I mean their social business strategy, how they're changing from the inside out. And culture was a big issue. Right. They had spent so much time studying conversations about customers, sentiment, impressions. They had not spent a minute looking at employee sentiment. Mm-hmm. And as they were getting ready to deploy this really, really aggressive strategy, I asked the question, so how do employees feel about working here? Oh, well, we actually just did a study around that. About 60% of our employees, it was a huge number, I'm making that up, so, but it was a huge number of employees that were their detractors. Mm-hmm. People who just weren't happy there at all. So when we talk about training employees around what not to do, what does training even look like when somebody can't stand with the brand? And how do you then train around humanizing what does Bloomberg stand for? What do any of these companies that you work with stand for, so that people are not just worried about what not to do on Twitter or Facebook, but how do they embrace that?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, one of the inherent requirements of being transparent is you have to take that information and do something with it. So if you have, it's not good enough, let's put it that way, to go and train people what not to say, because they're going to say it anyway at some point. Right. Even if it's subliminal, they'll think that they're not being watched. The real issue is, and I think we've had this in a variety of different ways, where employees have not been incredibly happy about something or other. And the way I think we've thought about it is we take that as feedback. And I think that's true of your customers too, and prospects. If you're not prepared to take the heavy hits and then do something about it, meaning take that information and try to make a change, then you're never going to change the problem. You're never going to solve it. You're always going to have this issue of trying to cover something up you can't cover up. And that's the problem of the world we live in today. Is we look at BP. You can't apply these old patches to these new problems. Right. So you have to be open. You have to be willing to change something and do something, be seen to be doing it.
Well, the one thing that I can appreciate about KitchenAid's approach was, once it was realized, somebody stepped up to the plate and apologized, was very honest and transparent about how that situation happened and what they were going to do about it. I think that's certainly interesting, but at the same time, I don't know that employees for most of the businesses where culture isn't already a fundamental strategy, right? Zappos that's an intentional strategy around what it is that they're trying to do, and it's a movement where social just becomes an extension of who they are. So how then, if a company isn't already there, especially at a time where companies are still used to prepared communications to the market, how do you break through and get them to listen that this is important now? And how do you get them to start thinking about purpose, whether it's the fifth or sixth P? And how do you get them to then embrace that as part of the culture, and then where trust and transparency aren't just pillars of a social business, but they're part of your strategy?
Well, that's a longer conversation, but one, I would show them the new trust attributes. That operational attributes are today's trust, but tomorrow's trust, when you can't control it, is about having relationships and being engaged. Employees and customers are at the center. And you need to listen, and you've got all sorts of social tools to listen, but then you need to pull out of your culture, and I would bet every single company in this room is already doing something, whether it's community, whether it's environmental, whether it's social issues engagement. Right. And it's finding that, the truth about your mission, and then bringing the two together. There's this term called shared value. It's not just about writing a check, but it's taking your core competencies, listening to your employees and other core stakeholders, and then finding your purpose and really engaging into it. What you get from it, besides glue for your organization and powerful capital, is you get a new narrative. And we all want, in social, to have a narrative that's going to resonate, that's going to be powerful, and it's going to be shared. That's when you get involved in social or environmental issues that are credible and authentic and long-term. That narrative flows on its own. You'll have some challenges, but it also allows you, this really, if it's true to your, and authentic to your brand and your culture, that's about corporate character. And that's tomorrow's trust.
I'd add one other thing, which is, you know, the obvious answer in many ways is you have to have some sort of top-down commitment. Right?
Yes.
Because you don't get too far if you don't.
Right.
And when I first came in at Bloomberg, one of the things that our CEO and chairman said to me was, you know, take time to get to know people. Don't make this a revolution. And that got me thinking. And this is the thing I've lived by ever since, which is it's not a revolution that you're trying to create. And it's certainly not an evolution. That takes way too long. But if you think about it as an infection, you need to have that top, yeah, it sounds gross.
That's all right.
I was just thinking that.
It's a little runny, but you know. But the idea is that, yeah, you need that commitment from people from top down, but if you're going to really win, don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Find little things where you can make a difference that actually show people that this works. And surprise, surprise, other people in the organization will want to be part of that.
Right. Rob, with the 26 seconds we have left, how did you get them to reverse that stance on social media?
Well, I think it was one part enthusiasm and one part fear. I think I said something like, you know, we really need to know this stuff, because at some point if we say we're not going to do this, someone else is going to do it for us, and we won't be prepared. So, you know, don't worry about our current competitors, worry about the ones we don't even know about who are using these tools to build new businesses and products. We need to be in this conversation. If we're not, then we're really leaving stuff on the table.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to just take a moment, Rob, Carol, thank you so much for your wisdom. And also just thanks for being here and sharing your stories. They're going to be around to talk to you and answer your questions as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks. Recess.